Welcome back, Chris. Chris van Gutten is from the Erasmus University College in Brussels and part of the STEP. And he will present to us today's first Erasmus Plus project, TeBeVAT. Chris, the stage is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for the delay, but that's what happens these days. I'm going to try to introduce you a little bit into the TeBeVAT project. And in fact, the TeBeVAT project is a series of projects. We started with the TeBeVAT 1, and of course, then you get TeBeVAT 2 and 3. Basically, what all these projects are working on is to create tools for recognizing previous acquired competence. In other words, people have learned skills, competences in their work environment, and we want to provide them with tools to recognize these. We do this in the first place by supporting the candidate, and the way the candidate, the learner, is the central person in this whole process. It's very much, let's say, student-centered. And we support people that want to have these competences assessed. As we already heard in the previous talk about the micro-credentials, assessment is crucial in the way you could have someone sitting in the classroom for 6 weeks, and I can give him a certificate that he was there, but that has no value to an employer. What the employer wants to know is that he's really able what he learned. And we do so by using a structured portfolio based on the ESCO competences. Okay. What we did already in previous TeBeVAT project, we looked into what the whole process would be and how we could guarantee the quality. We developed some mock-ups of long life documenting tools, which is kind of a extreme type of a portfolio, including self-evaluation, including documentation, and so on. And one of the crucial elements in that is that the portfolio, the LLDT, has to be owned by the candidate. What we see in a lot of cases in education systems, for example, is that the portfolio is owned by the institute that is just using it, and afterwards it disappears, which makes that the next time somebody needs some proof, he has to start all over again in another system and so on. We really want this tool to be owned by the users in the way that they can take it along with them in their whole life and documenting their life in that way. We looked into how we mentor this, and we looked into how we could create a personal development plan for the things that are missing. On all these projects, we're building on previous projects. I talked already this morning a little bit about all the projects we've done in the past. In fact, we're building on top of the concepts that were developed there, the tools that were developed there. We're reshaping them, we're updating them, and in that way, we are able to go a step further within the resources we have. The process we developed looks more or less like this, in the way the first step is to identify the candidate and the needs of the candidate. In the way, what does he really want? Where does he want to go to? In a second step, we will document what the candidate already has on competences, on skills, knowledge, and so on, what his experience is. And if needed, we will go to a personal development plan and update his skills so they can be documented again, and then they can go to an assessment procedure. And this assessment procedure can lead to a validation or a certification. If there is discussion, there is a whole series of appeals possibilities. That's one of the things we're working on right now, to guarantee that the candidate has all the rights he's supposed to have as part of our quality management. And in fact, the quality management runs over the whole procedure. If we look a little bit more in detail, we see this identification process has two parts. The first part is a purely administrative part, in the way you need to apply and we have to be sure and we have to ensure that we are able to see your documents and that we are complying to the GDPR and so on. In a next step, a mentor will take over, and a mentor is somebody that is not supposed to judge. He's supposed to help, to give new insights, to discuss, but not to judge if what the candidate has done in the past is good or not. What the mentor can do in the next step, and that is mainly in the documentation part, he can support the candidate while documenting his information with his background knowledge of what the assessor, how the assessor will look to this evidence. We, in the tests we've done, we've seen that it's very difficult for candidates to understand which type of evidence, which kind of proof is valid for assessment in the past. Probably in this documentation program, we'll also see some lacks in the competence set of a candidate. And based on that, we can create a personal development plan, which can be formal, which can be go and follow another education program, which also can be more informal, like, oh, you should have a look again at this type of thing. And you can use all kind of tools for that. It can be online learning, it can be formal training, but it can also be just some more repetition in your work or some adaptation of what you are doing in your work. If the candidate is ready for assessment, we go to the next step, and there the assessment will look into the portfolio and probably will see, okay, this and this and these things, we understand that they are proved, but some other things probably you will need to see. Practical skills like climbing a ladder are very hard to document. To give a very simple example, they are probably in the assessment. You will say, okay, I want to create an assessment moment where I can see that you're really able to do things. Assessment only on paper is very hard in our sector. Main reason is that we want people to be able to do things and not just to understand the theory or the knowledge behind it, but we really want to see them do it. So that's the reason that next to this documenting tool, there will be also different assessment methods to assess competence that you can't prove on paper. And then, of course, you have an appeals process, which in our vision, if you talk about the European certificate, for example, could be on 3 levels. The first level would be mediation. In the way we've seen often that the complaints or the appeals are based on misunderstanding of things, and their mediation would be the best way because you're not burning bridges. You're just helping people to get back on the right track. The next level would be a local level where you really have an independent ombudsperson that can try to bring the parties together. And then in the last step, you would have kind of mediation on a European level, which has the advantage that it's independent from the organization that did the assessment and can kind of bring people together again. That's in very rough what the whole process is that we have in mind. Where are we working on concretely now? We're working on the assessment and appeals process. We're looking for the occupational profiles of the mentor and the assessor. We will develop some policy recommendations, and we are creating an online handbook. Okay, the assessment and appeals process is mainly focused on informal and non-formal learning. It's not assessment of formal learning because that is what you do within a school or whatever, but our focus is really on this informal and non-formal, which can mean people following courses online, which can be people using their work experience and so on. And we try to match this concept with the expectations of the validating and awarding bodies, because ideally we would create a system that would fit into the existing systems of certificates and qualifications. That's a bit the concept behind that, which means that we have to make it comparable and reliable in an educational context. Important in that is that we use the standard, I get back to that later, which is really made for this type of organizations. The appeal process is part of this, is part of the quality standard that we use for the organization. Pretty important to understand is the difference between process and result in this case. The process of learning is about effort. Your grading is about effort, is about how are you getting better, and the quality of it is based on the service to the learner. So the main stakeholder is the learner, while qualification is a statement about competence. It doesn't matter if you learned something in a school or in your private life or on your work. The qualification just says you're able to do this. The quality there is about the measurement of the result, about the assessment. And the stakeholder there is not in the first place the learner, but the employer. It's the quality of the qualification of the result is something that relates to, can an employer trust this qualification? So there are two different types of processes, and by keeping them apart, you create a larger objectivity in the qualification part. Okay, how do we deal with this assessment? In the first place, we create a sectoral layer, a detail of the competences, and one of the elements in that is the acceptable assessment methods. We're gonna see for which type of competence or skill would fit a specific assessment method. In some cases, that can be a paper test. In other cases, it means we want to observe it in a real life situation or in a simulated situation. So that is one element. And a second element, which is rather crucial into the assessment, is the training of assessors, which means that they are able to work on a certain level. Objectivity is extremely important there, bias and that type of stuff, only observing what you're supposed to observe. We help them in creating a methodology for the assessment, how to create good assessment situations. And of course, they need to be trained in the procedures. Now, as I said earlier, is the quality is transparency in the way we work with the common profile. It's connected to ESCO, so it should be clear for everyone what a certain certificate means. That's the first part. The second part is you need to trust the assessment and the certification. And there we use a quality standard, which is made for quality testing of bodies certifying individuals. This is a standard which in most European countries also is part of legislation, in the way that if an organization meets this standard, the other countries should accept the certifications or the qualifications made by this organization. And the third element is the freedom. We don't want to say you have to learn this in this way or that way. Every candidate is free to learn how he wants, but the measurement, because there is not the main stakeholder, the measurement is of the result is what we do. But how you learn it is free for every candidate. If we look into this mentor and assessor, we've created occupational profiles that are based on ESCO, and we organize them in reusable units. I get back to that in a second. And we also propose to the European ESCO working group to integrate these two profiles into the new version of ESCO, which will come out, I think, in a year or so. Which means, again, that you get this transparency, that everybody knows what they can expect from an assessor or from a mentor, and that every country can create their own training based on these expectations. So that's a second element, and we checked and validated these two profiles with stakeholders, which were mainly other organizations and other projects we worked for in the past. So we can create a common profile that is used by several organizations and profiles. It's set up in building blocks, and the building blocks are created in such a way that they are reusable for these two profiles, in the way communication and feedback is something what a mentor needs and what an assessor needs. In the future, it's quite possible that we reuse also some of these units for the mediator, for the ombuds, or for the teacher, for example. And in this way, people can build up step by step a full profile where they can mentor, where they can assess, where they can teach. And in that way, you create a way more efficient way of training these people that understand the system of this competence-based work. To give you one example, one of these blocks is about following ethical codes and create your and have a quality standard to the interaction of with the candidates, which is basically again a building block that can be used by mentor and assessor, and probably also by teachers and so on. The training schedules we're developing for the mentor and the assessor are based on a sectoral layer that we develop on these ESCO competences. So we will detail these ESCO competences in order that they fit our specific needs, and we will organize them in skills and knowledge and values or attitudes. And they will include the assessment methods and the training methods. So in that way, we start from an ESCO profile, we detail it in a sectoral layer, and we ensure quality by saying, okay, it has to be assessed in this way, and it can be trained in this way. That's the second part. The third part is that we are developing policy recommendations, and we're mapping stakeholder requirements. In other words, we're looking how can we integrate the system we are developing into the sector, into the different organizations that are already giving certificates or qualifications, and how does this fit into what is specific for our sector. And at the end, it will create a set of innovation opportunities. It will help also other organizations that are now already assessing to get into a common system, which, for example, improves the exchangeability between different countries. The last element we're working on is the online handbook. And the online handbook is basically, it's not a book, but it's a digital platform that will get the full sectoral layer of the different competences. It will also show you the sectoral layer of a set of occupations and units. It will give you the structured portfolio and self-evaluation. So it's a fully online tool that can be used by everyone. And I would like to go with you a little bit more in detail to the sectoral layer. So basically what a sectoral layer is a very large description of what is two sentences in ESCO. In ESCO you have the title of an occupation, of a competence, and you have a description and some technical information like it has a version, it has a unique URL that you can reuse and automatically jumps into the right language. That's our basic. What you see is there is kind of a large number here, but I get back to that in a second, because that is the second part. Is while ESCO is a big box with competences, but that not really has a structure that is workable for our sector at the moment to work on, because there is, I think, 15,000 competences. We organize the competence in a specific way. We organize them by field and subfield. So that's, for example, lighting as a field and moving heads or follow spotting as a subfield. That gets a number. We give it a place in the process. This means this competence will occur mostly at one moment in the process, which can be the rehearsal process, which can be the performance, which can be independent of the process. The advantage of doing so is that if you combine the field and the subfield and the place in the process, you get kind of a logic into the competences. That is, whatever profile you make, if you order it by these numbers, it will become in an order that is logical for the end user. And that's one of the most important things I think we are trying to do, is we're making these sometimes rather abstract concepts, we make them readable for the end user. On top of that, we create a level, and this level is only an indicator, because it's not really possible to give a level to a competence. So what we do is we say this competence occurs on the lowest level, in this case, number 3. So it doesn't say anything. It's quite possible it also occurs on a level 7, on an EQF level 7. But the lowest level is the one we mark. That helps you to select a group of competences if you're working for a specific level. And at the end, it has a unique identifier, of course, because otherwise we would mess up things. We give a sectoral detail. In some cases, we rewrite the ESCO competences a little bit in the way that they are more understandable for the end user. We're not changing the meaning, we're just making it more concrete. We give it a description. In some cases, we also need to give a context to understand better what exactly it means, and a scope note. And this scope note basically gives you the limitations. In the way, if we say, to give one example, working on height as a general competence, probably it will say it does not include working on ropes, because that's a very specific competence that is only for a limited amount of people. But working on a step ladder, working on a balcony, or so on, would be, and that the scope note clarifies how you have to make an interpretation of this competence. Then we split out this competence into a series of skills, knowledge, and attitudes. And these are really observable sentences. In the way, these are sentences that you can use to create assessment on, or you can use them to create training content. The knowledge is organized in such a way that it's reusable. In the way, safety legislation is something that probably will come back in several units. So if I'm creating a training program or an education program, I will probably see that safety legislation is in 4 parts. So I can join that together, but I keep the link with the different competences where it is useful. If a candidate has a certificate of some kind on safety, probably he also already has had the safety legislation. So in that case, you can skip that. And autonomy and attitudes are really crucial in our sector. If we ask employers what type of people they need, in most cases, they won't say what the technical skills are, but in most cases, they will tell us how they have to behave. This is not a new phenomenon. If you read Sabatini from 1400 something, the main thing he says about technicians is that you have to be able to trust them, they have to be serious, and they have to be silent. So which is mainly the focus on attitude more than on technical skills, which doesn't mean that the skills are not important, but without the attitude, it's very hard to work within our sector. There is a section about assessment, and that gives you different ways of assessing. In the first place, it gives you 2 sets of sentences that are used for self-assessment and for mentor assessment. They are written in a concrete way, in the way that every candidate understands, okay, I can look at my level and I can tell you, okay, this is what my level is. And it's written from their point of view. For the mentor, they're written from the point of view of the mentor, which makes it very easy to score them. The strange thing is that it goes faster to make people do a self-assessment with 50 or even 100 of these statements, because they're concrete, than with more general questions where they have to judge what the question really means. That's a bit the idea behind that, but we get back to that at the end for a second. And we also have their accessible assessment methods. In other words, we will say, okay, these are methods that are reliable for this type of competence. They can be reliable as a sole assessment method, or they can be supportive. In the way, I can say, no, working with a moving platform is a thing I want to see, but it can be supported by extra evidence that comes from your portfolio, for example. And the last part, which in this concrete one is pretty short, it gives you some tips on how to train this best. Some things can be learned in a class and then trained afterwards. Some things it's better to have practice first. Some things is better to train them on a long time span, bit by bit, and so on. And we get a series of references to other systems where you can find more detail. So the whole of this information describes in detail a competence, and this information can be used by all kinds of different tools and can be used for different purposes. We also bundle them together into profiles, and there is two ways of doing this. One way is what we did with the mentor, is there we described the whole profile, because it's a thing you always need together in this case. Or we describe them in smaller modules. For example, for the portfolio we are developing, you can choose one model and just be assessed, one module and just be assessed on that module. It makes sense that the nice thing is that people don't have to do a full qualification or a full certification, but they can say, okay, in my future job, I will need more about power distribution. And based on that, they can do one module, which gives the employer the certainty that they're able to do power distribution. Again, it has a title, description, and a scope note. And when we use profiles that are used in ESCO, they also will be linked to ESCO. The detail of these occupations is just a list of the competences, and they're clickable. So from the occupational profile, you can click and see the detail of every of these competences. Now we have to look for a second to the structured portfolio. And basically you have a profile. It has a set of competences in it with all their details. And what we do is we support the candidate to bring evidence to this competence. And evidence can be a lot of different things. It can be a product you made, let's say a technical documentation of a production. It can be pictures of your work in the case of, let's say, a lighting design. It can be a recording in case of a sound design. It can be plans. It's basically everything that really proves what you have done in your work experience. This, in combination with assessment, where we test people, and the assessment is against also the profile, the combination of these creates your structured portfolio. One of the big advantages is that this portfolio can be reused in the way you've done an assessment at one moment. A month later, you have a new work experience which creates evidence. You just can add that to this structured portfolio. At one moment you apply for a job, you can use this structured portfolio to show to an employer what the evidence is of the different things you have done. The fact that the ownership is with the candidate also means that the candidate decides what he shows and what he does not show. This means it becomes very useful also for specific job applications. A lot of people in our sector have 7 different skills. They're production leader and they're also technicians, they're operators, they're designing. If you apply for a design job, it doesn't make much sense to show all your technical skills. So there you could make a selection and show that to one employer. So the backbone of the skills and competences connected to ESCO also can be used for a lot of different purposes. We hope in a short future, because we have this link to ESCO, that it will be possible to also link your structured portfolio to Europass. Europass is working on the integration of ESCO into their system. If we can link onto that, it means that you get a sustainable system in the way that lasts for the future, that is integrated in all the national systems, and that you can use in all kind of different ways using your structure.
Chris, sorry, may you just wrap it up a little bit? We're over time. Thank you.
My last slide. So the only thing I just wanted to say is that what the self-evaluation tool is basically linked, and basically it's 4 levels. I've never done something, I'm on my way, I'm able to do this, and I'm very good in it. The reason we chose for these 4 levels and not 2 is because they're stimulating. In the way, if you work with someone, it's nice to say you're on your way, or you're very good in this, you're better than we expect. But the real 2 levels is I'm able to do it or I'm not able to do it. So, I'm ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that excellent presentation. TeBeVAT seems to be a really interesting project. We already have several questions, and I would ask you to answer them really as briefly as possible. Thank you. The first question is, you said earlier projects are running for almost 20 years now. Can you explain what the big difficulty is?
Sorry, what the big?
Difficulty.
The difficulty is it's a slow process. We develop bit by bit concepts and we bring them together. And the difficulties have been changing over the years. When we started, we were at the edge of the idea of competence-based learning. Learning at that time was knowledge transfer. So that was the first step. We had to convince the sector in education that a competence-based approach where the knowledge and the attitudes are underlying a competence was a good thing. That was the first thing. The difficulties we have now is convincing people that assessment in a different way than we are used to it in education is quality improving. I think that's the 2 main things we had to tackle.
The 2 other questions are related to your first talk. Unfortunately, they came a little bit too late. So the first one is ECVET or ECVET something to do with ESCO?
Yes and no. In the way ECVET is a credit system, just like ECTS is a crediting system for higher education. The problem is you can't put a credit on a competence because a competence can occur in different levels. And if it occurs in a higher level, the amount of credits shrinks because credits at the end are learning effort. In higher education, for example, in a bachelor degree, we say, okay, 30 hours of learning effort is 1 credit. If I would teach the same thing on a level 3, on a very basic level, it would probably be way more, take more time, and so have more credits. We've been experimenting with bringing that from one level to another, but that's not easy. So we can't connect them really to competences. We can't connect them to occupations because that's very difficult to do for the same reason. When there will be more qualifications into the ESCO, there we will be able to use credits in combination with a level. So probably it will say this certification or this qualification is 60 credits on a level 7.
Thank you, Chris. Last question for you. Can we have a link to the platform ESCO? It seems quite difficult to see precisely what it is common.
Yes, very simple trick. You just search on ESCO and you type EU behind it, and then you get directly to the right side.
Was a very fast answer. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation again. And thanks to the audience for your questions.